Thank you for joining us today for episode 78 of Think Big with Michael Zellner, all positive, no politics. My guest today is the Museum Operations Director for the French Victorian Mansion, the Woodruff-Fontaine House Museum, a historic building in Memphis, Tennessee. And she's going to tell us about some really interesting stories. Today is Halloween, so it's going to be really exciting to hear these stories that you can share with your family and everything. And hopefully, if bring them on and let them look at this podcast too, because you will be really excited and surprised once you hear about this today. My guests are Georgia Cooper. She is that director, and also a special guest host with me today is longtime radio personality here in the Memphis and the Mid-South, Steve Conley. Welcome to the show, guys.
Hello. Good to be on, man.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. So hauntedhouses.com said, quote, "For a variety of reasons, sometimes people are so attached to their homes that they can't bring themselves to leave them when they pass on and choose to stay instead of going on to the other side," unquote. Georgia has joined Steve and me today to share some of these stories about some of those people who just don't want to leave the Woodruff-Fontaine House Museum, and they let the visitors know they're there, and they let the work staff know that they're there and that they're still around. So, Georgia, there's been evidence gathered by at least two paranormal investigation groups who've examined the Woodruff-Fontaine House Museum, and they both came up with evidence pointing to two different spirit entities who reside there. Can you tell us a little bit about them?
Well, without you saying who they came up with, two of the main ones that we often think we have some contact with is Molly Woodruff and Elliot Fontaine. They seem to be, I don't know, almost the most popular. They're two different families, one obviously from the Woodruff and one from the Fontaine family. So they're being represented, both families. But there are other forms of energy as well that we have been able to assign a family member, if that makes any sense, just from what we know about the families. So Molly is probably the most famous, Molly Woodruff.
Do you, Georgia, can you sense that Molly is still in the house, or do you have any idea about, who might still be hanging around?
Okay, so from my personal experience, I do believe that Mrs. Virginia Fontaine is always present. Wow. She is always there. I've encountered a little bit of Mrs. Fontaine-esque situations. I believe she's there. She's looking over her home that she loved. She was there for 46 years almost. And her presence to me is one of the most prevalent. Now, Molly
and when you say that, what would lead you to that?
One of my first experiences when I was a little newbie, I was a volunteer, was basically, it was just a simple little quick, I thought I saw something, wasn't sure. It was a silhouetted profile of a very properly sitting woman in our ballroom, which is the largest parlor in the home. It's on the first floor. And I caught a quick glimpse, wasn't quite sure what I'd seen because it was over with so quickly. But then I kind of was like, this is strange, because I know my eyes are fine. And then I was talking with someone, and a lady that had been with us for a very long time as a volunteer, just matter-of-factly told me, "Oh, you just saw Mrs. Fontaine." And I said, "What?" Mrs. Fontaine died in 1928. So I wasn't ready to push the panic button or go, "Oh, ghost, ghost, ghost." I just thought I saw something. I expressed there was a little strangeness, and I was just told matter-of-factly that is who I saw. So I said, okay.
And from the onset, when you started as a volunteer, you weren't necessarily a believer in the paranormal and that kind of thing, were you?
No, I was probably like average people. It's kind of like, oh, well, it might be cool if there's something. And maybe as I was growing up, I may have had something I felt was an encounter, but no, I wasn't going in there to hunt ghosts per se, or even really think about that. That's not why I joined to volunteer. It's about the history and the preservation. So I had a bit of a skeptical ear, I will admit, but I had had a few experiences in my life where I was kind of like, well, there's something. Like I always say, I tell this a lot on my ghost tours, people have been living and dying on this earth for thousands of years. All that residual energy stays in our atmosphere. Some, I think, have a stronger desire to have a little more of their essence, their energy stick around, maybe in the place where they were the happiest. But if you want to get technical, you want to talk about residual energy from human beings, everything that has lived on this planet, we're surrounded all the time. All the time. There's one beside you right now, I'm sure. Both of you.
It's been said that Molly Woodruff is not a fan of her furniture being rearranged in the bedroom, and reportedly is heard expressing her disapproval of this when that's happened. How has she done that?
Now, that is something I've heard. That's one of the older stories from days of yore. The house has been a museum since 1964. So apparently a lady had been working, or she was new working. I think I'm getting this straight. Let me make sure. There was an attempt to kind of rearrange some of the furniture in Molly's room, which is on the second floor. And a young lady, quote, came in and told the woman that she didn't care for it. It should have been the other way, the way it was before. And apparently the woman that had been in there said this was like just seeing a young lady in the flesh. And she was told she needed to rearrange the furniture. And another volunteer, or whatever she was at the time, employee, comes along, and the woman's like, what's going on? Why are you moving the furniture back? And she said, well, I thought I was supposed to, because I just had a young lady come in here and tell me it needed to be the other way. So apparently she saw someone that she thought was in the flesh enough to, and she was new, so she probably thought, oh, I better do what they're suggesting. So that's one of the older stories that no one that I currently know, and there's some volunteers. There's one volunteer who's been there 30 plus years, since like the mid 80s. I think this was even before her time. So that supposedly was Molly. That supposedly happened in Molly's room. Molly has presented herself to others through the years. In more of a kind of, humming, disembodied voices. Now, I've experienced that myself. Humming, crying. There was some tragedy with Molly. That's, I think, one of the reasons her energy is so thick in the home. Her child died soon after being born. The child was actually born in her room in 1875. And that was common. That's what you did at home. 3 months later, her husband, and they'd only been married about 3.5 years, he somehow fell off a boat upriver. He had gone with some mates on a fishing expedition, maybe to help soothe his soul because of the loss of their infant. But he himself became very ill after he plunged into the river. He was brought home to be seen about by a physician, but he languished about 3 or 4 days and then died up there as well. So within that short amount of time, she lost both her child and her husband. And truth is, she had been married since 1871, and she had probably suffered maybe more than one miscarriage and a stillbirth or two. And that was the first recorded birth. And the baby didn't make it after just a short time. So
interesting. Now you've had. Go ahead.
No, I was just saying she's very attached, obviously. She got married in the home as well in 1871, soon after they moved in. So her happiest, saddest times were right there in that home.
I wish we could show this house. It is a grand house, and just taking a tour, take away the paranormal. I mean, it's just fascinating how these, very well-to-do people lived. And I can imagine back at the turn of the century, that street, how incredible it must have been, with horses going up and down, the carriage houses in the back, where my daughter, as a matter of fact, is going to get married in a year from today. And that's what led me to ask questions about it from Jennifer. And then she sent us to you. And this house is just magnificent. All the servants' quarters and the kitchen you guys have restored and put in there. And it really is a fascinating look as how people lived back in those days, and a fireplace in every room, because obviously they didn't have central heat or air. Air was just big windows, I guess. Right.
Right.
And but it looks a little bit, like, the Addams Family kind of house looking thing.
It does.
Look.
A lot of people say that.
Yeah, it's so cool. And so, take away like I said, the Halloween or the paranormal aspect. You've had a couple of these ghost TV shows come in and do segments in the house. Did they find anything, those guys?
Yes. Now, several years ago, and there was a show called, I think it was Ghost Hunters. It was sci-fi network, I believe.
Yes.
They did an investigation. This was long before I was there. And they did find something. Now, what I've heard, that show did revamp. It went away for a while, but it's revamped. Hopefully they'll come back. But they had, I believe, some contact with Molly on the second floor and a possible entity on the third floor, if I'm remembering correctly. But they did, I guess their expertise opinion was that there are some sources of energy in the home. And it's, we don't need the fancy equipment, but we love that people have such an interest. But the day-to-day operations, when you least expect something, and Jennifer and I are there constantly, so it's like they know us, they know when we're there, and it's up to them when they choose to let us know that, hey, we hadn't forgotten about you. You could be quiet for a very long time, and then something really bizarre will happen, and it's kind of like them reminding us that they're still there. Don't take them for granted. And we always say they're not show ponies. They're not going to come trotting out, even for quote expert paranormal investigators. It's fully up to them if they want to play with us. And on a day-to-day basis, when we're just up there to run the museum, we just give them the respect and we kind of give them their space. So when they do have something to say or a little winky dink, a little something, we're privileged. We feel privileged that they have decided to communicate with us, however that may be. And there's been different forms. Like I said, I've heard disembodied voices. I've seen the holy grail, they say, of paranormal investigating, etc., is a full-on apparition. I've never seen that. I don't know what
have others.
I did. Yes, others have fully, because some people are supposedly sensitive. They're almost mediums. Some call themselves beacons, what have you. But yes, others have, because they feel they have the gift. I don't have that gift. I just have the privilege of being there, and they're like, well, you'll do, I guess, But some have seen full on. Elliot Fontaine has been seen, as well as Mrs. Fontaine. So those two stick out as some that I know that have been fully seen. I myself saw what I can only describe as a silhouetted version of Mrs. Fontaine up in her boudoir, but very, it was very startling for a second. And it was just a simple little petite silhouette, right where she needed to be, right at the time I needed her to be there, because she was on alert, because I was in the mansion after hours and we were taking some gentlemen through. They had been working on a filming situation in our basement. They came up for air. They were finished. They just asked if they could look around. And honestly, I was too lazy to go through there flicking lights on here and there. So I grabbed a flashlight. It was about 9:30 in the evening. And Jennifer and I decided to just, sure, we'll go through, but we're going to go kind of like with flashlight. Don't make me turn on all these lights. And they're like, what? I said, don't be scared. But the rule of the house, when any investigators come, and the paranormal investigators have a little more access than our tours would, of course, the tour guests. So they are allowed to go behind the ropes, as it would. And Mrs. Fontaine's room is always off limits. And we allow investigators, but any male presence, any male needs to ask permission. That is our rule. You ask permission before you step into Mrs. Fontaine's private chamber. That would have been the decorum of the day. Even her own sons would not have just burst through there without asking permission first. So I will always tell them, you need to walk in there first, ask permission before you go. And I said, don't wait for an answer, because it may not happen. But I believe she was on guard that evening, because there were 3 gentlemen. The house was still dark. It was kind of in her day, that would have been an extremely risque situation. And when I shone the flashlight into her room, they did not attempt to go in there. When I shone the flashlight in her room, because they were obviously just so curious about that room, I just kind of beamed the flashlight through the room, and there she was, just on the side of where her fireplace is, directly in front of us, a little tiny petite silhouette of a lady. And it made me kind of draw a breath in. They didn't see anything. My coworker Jennifer was standing back in the corner of the central hall, and I turned around out of reflex, looking at her, and through the moonshine coming through, the moonlight coming through the window, she saw the look on my face. She knew what I had seen, so she wasn't fazed at all. She just mouthed the words, "Mrs. Fontaine?" ? And I was like, "Yes,
Wow.
yes." And I believe she was there to say, nope, something's not quite right. Don't you let those gentlemen step into this room. Let's not get out of line here. That's what it felt like to me. So
yeah,
it was totally chaste. It was totally innocent.
That's cool.
Speaking of the paranormal investigators that you're talking about, it says that some of them at the beginning of their investigation, they made sure that the covers were pulled tightly across the bed in Molly's room, which is the Rose room. Can you share with the audience, what they noticed about the bed when they were halfway through their investigation? And there was a chair that was next to the bed too, I believe.
Yes. Now, although I'll just have to tell you real quick, although the room has stayed essentially the same, the chair beside the bed, what have you, we set up exhibits and we move things around. So I don't know which chair, whatever, but Molly's, it is not even officially her bed, but it's in her room. The bed that's in Molly's room, through the years, that's been one of the things that people have often seen: ruffled covers, indents on the bed, as though someone were sitting there, lying there. I myself have seen that personally. Just the other day, there was a strange chill in that room, and that happens occasionally. And it looks like someone's lying on the bed. Now, whether or not covers, I've heard that covers are just flipped up while they're investigating. I don't think I would go that far, but I may have not been there on that investigation. I have not seen that, but I have seen the bed has been mussed with a bit. And I always keep an eye out because I want to make sure these people aren't doing anything for dramatic effect. Like, don't go in there and ruffle those bed covers and then come out going, "Oh my goodness, did you see that?" So it's something I'm always keeping a sharp eye out for. But I have seen what looked like someone had kind of crawled across one side of the bed, and there was a gentle little indent and a large bolster pillow at the head of the bed. I have seen that myself. Jennifer and I saw it together. And she and I it was first thing in the morning. She and I had been the ones that had closed up the museum the day before. There weren't, and we always make sure everything's in apple pie order. There were no indents or ruffled covers or anything in that room that evening when we had locked up. First thing in the morning, it looked like something, the way I described it, it looked like something that kind of crawled over on one side and had just gone up and rested their head in the middle of the pillow. I did see that myself. And at the time that I'm staring at this with Jennifer, a really whooshy chill kind of came over us.
Gosh.
Wow. That was strange. That was like, what? Yeah. And we could just stand there. We stood there. If somebody could have seen our faces, we would have been like, so that was strange. That was a strange one.
If somebody wants to get a sense of what this house is like, which is remarkable, I just pulled up here and, the website or put it in Google, and there's a whole ton of pictures you guys have on this thing. It's really fascinating, but I'm going to flip this around a very crude way. Is this Molly's room right here? Can you see that?
Yeah, that's kind of blurry, but yes, I believe that is. It's a little blurry, but I honestly, Steve, that's very blurry.
It's sort of blurry.
Okay, I can't see it. Okay, I'm sorry.
It's the camera. It's all right.
It's a red runner going through, and it's, do you have some little mannequins in there or something?
We always have mannequins on display because we have a very large antique textile collection, and we love to show off our lovely vintage textiles, ball gowns, day dresses, things like that. Yeah. So that red runner is no longer in existence, thank God, because it was awful. But the most remarkable thing that's noticeable about Molly's room is the beautiful cabbage rose wallpaper. You can't mistake that. So do you see that in that photograph? Because honestly, that was very blurry.
Yes.
I had something to show you. I wish we were at the mansion, but yes, that was Molly's room, and that ghastly red runner is gone. Whew.
Okay. Well,
but mannequins are always around because we dress them for the season and exhibit.
Have you ever had an experience? And I had one years ago. It was in a Midtown mansion. I had dinner with the lady, and we were in the kitchen talking. And as we were talking, there were pots and pans hanging over a stove. And suddenly, it's like somebody had run their hand across these hanging pots. And I just went, instantly a chill went through my body. I went, what was that? And she smiled. She said, well, that's, Henrietta, whoever's in the house. And I'm going, oh, my God, clang, 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 clang. And, they're still swinging in front of me. And I'm looking for a draft or some kind of a puff of air. And there was nothing. And she said it happens all the time, randomly, right, that things move and stuff like that. Have you ever seen any objects like that move? Or?
Well, now personally, another strange thing that sticks out in my mind is Elliott-Fontaine. We tell Elliott's story on a daily historical tour. We get to the Elliott story on the 3rd floor where he died in 1918. He died in the world's last pandemic, the Spanish flu. And that's kind of his turf up on the 3rd floor. And we have a photograph of Elliott, what he would have looked like. He was a very handsome young man. We have a photograph of Elliott, what he would have looked like close to the time he died. And it's in a beautiful antique frame. Mostly it stays up on the 3rd floor in Elliott's domain, but occasionally it has come down. We'll bring it down depending on the exhibit. One morning we got there to open the museum, and I was going through the foyer, turning on lights, just doing my normal routine. And I just turned and looked at the bottom of the staircase, the third step up from the bottom, looking at me through the spindles was that photograph, that framed photograph of Elliott-Fontaine. Again, just like with the Molly theme from before, we had been the ones that closed up the museum the night before, and there was nothing amiss, nothing askew. So first thing in the morning, we're popping it open. How did Elliott, what in the world? I apologize for the bing bong, that's my clock. That photograph made its way down in the frame, the beautiful frame, and it was just looking at me through those spindles like, good morning. And that is what I did. I just stopped and I looked over there and I said, well, good morning, Elliott. And he just looked at me, through his photograph. And I'm like, okay, I don't know how you got here, but I'm taking you back to your home. And there was a tiny little crack in the corner of the glass on the frame. To this day, I don't know, do not know, have no explanation for how that got all the way down from the 3rd floor to the 3rd step from the bottom of the main staircase. I don't know.
Wow. Interesting.
It would have been interesting to see how it moved down there.
Yeah.
But anyway, that was a weird one. That was a strange one for the books. But I can tell y'all my first initiation into the mansion for them to let me know that there is something there. I was a little skeptical, but I didn't voice it out loud, but it's kind of like they knew. And it's like I tell my new volunteers, you may get hazed if you, you get initiated sometimes. And mine was innocently enough, I was taking down our Christmas tree. It was the 2nd week in January. And I had been there, I'd been volunteering for a short time, a few months, but this was my first Christmas season. And it involved a massive 12-foot Christmas tree. And FYI, we will be fully decorated for Christmas in just a few weeks. But anyway, I was on our very large, 12-foot ladder, making sure all of the Christmas ornaments were down off of that main Christmas tree we keep in the ballroom. And Jennifer's there at the bottom, kind of steadying the ladder. And I'm standing up almost to the top of the ladder. I said, well, nothing is left on this tree. It is clean. And she said to me, okay, well, come on down because we've got to take this thing apart. It's a huge 12-footer, 5 giant pieces. So I started to descend the ladder, and out of nowhere, something popped me on top of my head, something unseen. It was a nice, solid thunk to the top of my head. And when I talk about it, when my sisters and I were growing up, my dad, if we were getting on his nerves and he needed to get our attention, we wouldn't get smacked, thank goodness. But boy, he was quick to give a nice thump on top of the skull, right on that top of that head. That's what it felt like. Something was trying to get my attention. Something was saying, hey, you, like I'm not doing something right or whatever. And I just stopped. Ouch, it stung. Jennifer was way down on the floor. She looked up at me. She said, what was that noise? She heard that noise. So I had a witness. And I said, something just hit me on top of my head. It felt like a squirrel threw an acorn at me or something. And I asked her, I said, did you see anything fall and hit the floor? She said, no, I saw nothing. Nothing hit this floor. And I got down the ladder really quickly. And of course, she and I went about crawling around the floor for a little bit. There was nothing. It was just a very strange, Georgia, this is your moment. You need to get real. Pop. And to this day, I'm like, that was my initiation. I got hazed. And my eyes and ears have been wide open ever since. That was funny. It was kind of disturbing at first because like, what did I do wrong? Did I step on somebody? What's happening here?
And you've had other like painters and construction people or something, Jennifer said, that have experienced like, you're messing with our house kind of thing or something. Is that accurate?
When we have some work to be done in the mansion, anything, and this year has been fairly a big year for projects. We had our dining room. Finally, one of the things on our wish list, we had our dining room ceiling. Some gentlemen came in to do a scrape of the ceiling to see what was under all the paint. And we've had some other construction projects going on. So it's been very busy. And the house knows it doesn't like the disturbances so much, but it's kind of like something could happen. You might hear something fall. You might hear a thud. I've heard footsteps before, little tippity-tappity. These are not our normal human footsteps. We Americans these days, we're heavy, we thud when we walk for the most part. And in that house, as you can imagine, noises carry, footsteps do not go unheard. But I've heard tippity-tappity, like I'm being disturbed, leave me alone, I'm going to hide in my room. But these folks that are there doing projects and such, they can feel something sometimes. They can feel like a heaviness. Maybe it's like, maybe we're not supposed to be here. They've heard
it catches them unexpectedly, probably.
Yeah, probably. But they'll be banging equipment around or whatever. And then that, I believe, disturbs the energy. We're always very cognizant of the fact when we're setting new exhibits up, we don't need to get too carried away. And we can all get caught up in being really busy. I'm the ladder person. I'm always up on ladders. I'm always like scaling the walls and hanging. And I will admit it, I've let out a couple of words that I probably shouldn't have, while we're in the middle of that, all that going on. And sometimes they'll just let us know, calm down, respect, or I'm not happy that this is happening right now. Wow. So we'll dial it down a little bit. But if there's a project going on that needs to be done, we just have to talk to them. We will explain to them even before it starts what's happening. And we usually tell that to Mrs. Fontaine. She's the lady of the home. She's the boss. We feel, even more so than the first lady of the house, Mrs. Woodruff. But yeah, we explain to them what's going to happen. We let them know it's all in good graces. It's for the good of the legacy and the beautiful home. We'll talk about it. We'll tell them, just like we tell them good morning when we open up in the morning.
That is so funny, and that television show Ghosts. I don't know if you've ever seen it on CBS. Have you ever seen Ghosts, the TV show? It's
no,
where
I think I know what you're talking about. I have not.
That's the premise of, it's a big mansion and it's got ghosts in it. And one of the characters, the lady, can see the ghost. The husband can't, but it's all sorts of ghosts. It's an Indian. It's a Boy Scout who got an arrow through his neck. It's a Viking and all these other people. And, maybe perhaps that's not far-fetched from the truth. And all the ghosts hang out at this house. Yes. And you know, it's a little sitcom or whatever, but maybe it's not far-fetched where a couple of different spirits still hang there.
Well, I will tell you, okay, so our mansion is fully furnished with period antiques, beautiful period antiques. Very few of those belong to the original families. We have some things, we have several items from the Fontaines, scant little of the Woodruffs. So anyway, the majority of these pieces have been donated from very generous benefactors. We're very fortunate. We believe that also things can come in, some kind of energy can come in on inanimate objects. These chairs, for instance, these settees, these pieces of antiques have seen so much. These pieces are 100, 150, 200, 250 and beyond years old. These pieces of furniture, of inanimate objects, have seen a lot as they've been passed around. And we believe that sometimes, even on our textiles, our clothing, we believe that there could be some energy that somehow comes into the mansion that that mingles with whatever's there. They kind of go in and out. I know that sounds cuckoo to some people. Everybody wants to think that, oh, well, ghosts are ghosts and they're going to stay where they died. No, that's not the case. Energy, like I said before, is around us. And even if something came in on a chair that had seen many regal bottoms or what have you, they have a story to tell. You know, it's really peculiar. I would invite anybody to come and do a daily historic tour. We always emphasize we're a historic property first. And our fun little bonuses, we just happen to have some energy that is of the supernatural type. Yeah.
No,
but that's we're not a haunted house.
Right.
You know, George, I understand that, you know, when you're talking about Elliot, that he also sometimes, you know, lets people know he's there. He maybe touches them, and then sometimes people can smell his cigar smoke too.
That is one that, yes, Elliot. Now, I have never smelled the cigar smoke, but I've had some people on my tour, a mother and a daughter, that I think they had a little bit of sensitiveness about them. I mean, the mother just politely asked, nobody smokes in here, do they? I said, well, heavens no, that is not allowed. And I asked her, why did she ask? Some people have super sensitive noses, but she said, well, I'm getting a very strong sense of smoke, a cigar or pipe smoke. It's very strong. And then her daughter, who was probably a preteen, I believe she was a tween or something, she said the same thing. She said it was also very overpowering in one section of the third floor that we attribute to Elliot's presence. And one of the ladies, a lady that had told me, that had been volunteering for a very long time, that told me, matter of fact, Mrs. Fontaine was there. She's the one that saw Elliot in full apparition form as well. And Elliot was smoking a cigar when she saw him. She was coming to the third floor to turn off lights. It was the end of the tour day, and she smelled the smoke, she said, before she even got to the last set of steps going up to 3. And as she ascended, she could smell it even stronger. And then she saw a young man in period clothing was actually sitting on, there's a secondary staircase on the 3rd floor that goes up to our tower. And she said that she saw him just sitting there like he was pondering life's mysteries, sitting and smoking. And she said she saw it as plain as day. She saw who she will say to this day was Elliot Fontaine. So I've been there a long time, and the 3rd floor is one of the only places in the mansion that I have never experienced any kind of anything. I don't know why the 3rd floor is when so many people have. Anything that may be a little more aggressive or assertive has been attributed to the 3rd floor through all the stories. But I'm like, well, I'm the one that got hit on the head by something on the 1st floor in the ballroom. So I don't know what you people are talking about. But there have been talks of like a lady with a ponytail, more than once, a ponytail getting kind of tugged, things like that, a little ruffle across the ponytail or the hair on their back. And I have experienced that, but that again was on the 1st floor.
You think that the spirits in the house mess with people, the new volunteers in there, to let them know, hey, we're here?
Absolutely. Yes.
Really?
That's what I said earlier. You get hazed, you get kind of initiated. Yes, they do. And one of my favorite stories is one of my lovely volunteers. She's been there now about 4 years. She's a young young lady. She's only in her mid-20s. And when she first started there, she didn't want to speak of the ghost. She wasn't there to do any of the paranormal things. She was there to do daily historic tours. And she told me, Georgia, my faith, I'm Catholic. I don't want to really delve into that. And I said, do not worry about it. You don't have to do that. That is not what we're about here. Unless you're on an evening tour specifically geared to that, don't worry about it. But she had a little incident on the 3rd floor, which we kind of attribute to Elliot because it's almost like a prank. And she was given a tour of several people, and her little escapade, as she calls it, caused her to kind of jump and squeal, and she embarrassed herself, but she felt like she heard a strange little sound, and then a little something kind of whoop up her skirt, kind of blew her skirt out. And I like to say, well, it sounds like you got goosed by a ghost. And it startled her so much that she let out a little squeal and she jumped forward, and everybody kind of nervously giggled. And she said, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. And she didn't ham it up. She just kind of was like, oh, she just said, I just, I thought I felt something. Well, 2 people on the tour had heard a little strange sound right before her skirt kind of blew out behind her. And they kind of knew something had happened. She was embarrassed, but she was kind of like, she wouldn't go back up on that 3rd floor by herself for probably a month. She would get me or somebody else there to go up there with her. And she's been a believer ever since. And I think that was her initiation, because she was, I don't want to say hardcore skeptic, but she did say, I don't know if I believe in any of this. And I said, you do not have to believe in any of this. You were here about history. So, yeah.
Elliot heard that conversation that you guys had when she was telling you that, because that's exactly why he did what he did, I'm sure.
Elliot seems to be a bit of a prankster, like with the photograph and the frame. He kind of likes to jazz people, like, ha ha ha, watch this. That's kind of what we feel with Elliot. Now we have gotten to know Elliot. He actually left behind, we have some of his handwritten journals. So we've seen in his own penmanship some of his thoughts on daily life in Memphis, 1912, 1913. One of the most interesting things is in 1912, in April, we all know what happened. He wrote of the sinking of the Titanic. He wrote of seeing his father pass away in the ballroom. He was operated on downstairs with an attempt to remove what they thought may be diseased kidney. Elliot was there observing. Elliot saw his father pass away. He wrote a very poignant entry about seeing that, and he knew at that exact moment that he was now the man of the house. His older siblings had moved away, had moved out of the home. Some of them were still in Memphis. But Elliot wrote about that in his journal. We've gotten to know Elliot somewhat through.
So that journal is in the house there?
Yes, we have it on display right now as we speak.
I'll be darned. And by the way, if somebody just joined this podcast, we're talking about the Woodruff-Fontaine House in Victorian Village on Adams Street downtown. And definitely worth taking a tour and seeing it outside of Halloween, just anytime. I mean, it's just a marvelous place. And you guys do events like weddings and things, don't you?
We do. We're a famed wedding venue. It all started in 1971 when Molly Woodruff got married there at the mansion right after the family moved in. And we like to say we've been hosting weddings since 1871. We also do museum-sponsored fundraising events. We partnered this summer with Old Dominic, had a nice little summer hot whiskey cold supper event, and these are open to the public. And we do a few of those through the year, and they're always fun, and people love doing something in an old mansion, which why wouldn't they, And it's beautiful. We're open, can I plug? We're open Wednesday through Sunday for historic daytime tours, 12 noon till 4 o'clock p.m. And it's exciting. And we do plenty of evening events also. I do a twilight tour at least once each month. That's an after hours tour served with refreshments. And we get to talk more about the things we've been discussing today, the more of the supernatural.
That would be fun.
They are fun.
I'll bet you're booked up for today for Halloween.
Probably, this is just a normal Sunday. Sunday's the last day of our week. Sunday's like our Friday. So we want to be over and done with pretty quickly. But we're open regular daytime historical hours, 12 to 4. Last admission is at 3:30. There's self-guided tours, but there's a lot going on with our well acquainted docents. And today's the last day of our Victorian morning exhibit, which I'm kind of glad to see go because it's up for a month and a half. We're draped in black. We have a coffin out. We talk about the whole Victorian customs that came into place in the United States during and after the Civil War. And it's a beautiful exhibit, and it can kind of wear on us. And the energy shifts with our exhibits as well. The energy feels, there's a lot of death in that house. Maybe they don't like being reminded. When we set up this exhibit and everything's in black and we put up text boards, educational text boards about what daily life was like when a loved one passed. And the energy shifts, as does our energy. We get a little like, ugh, you know, especially now, the end of the exhibit, we're tired of it. We will take down this exhibit this week. We will clean the mansion, throw the shutters open, let some daylight back in. 2 weeks, we will start going full on Christmas decorating, and the house and our energy just lifts. It's remarkable. You can feel the shift in the energy. They love the Christmas decor, especially when the children come in. Molly Woodruff loves children. She loves when they visit her and they're up there in her area on the second floor. And it just gets, the atmosphere takes on a different ring. And I think it's because everybody loves the holidays and the joyousness as we decorate, and then as the guests come in and ooh and ah, because it is beautiful. So the mood shifts, and this morning exhibit does it's dark and it gets a little burdensome, you know. So,
yeah.
But it's beautiful. You missed it. You should have come in. You still have time today though, or Sunday, whatever. I know this is going to air Halloween tomorrow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Georgia, what do you say to people? I mean, you've been there a long time now, and you were skeptical when you first got there. What do you say to people who are skeptical and, you know, maybe don't believe in ghosts and spirits that you've encountered?
Well, you know, for a while, Michael, at first, after I started experiencing things, I was scared, nervous. People regard me as cuckoo. I don't care now, whatever. But I never force my beliefs on anyone else. It's a see for yourself. And if you want to listen to this, fine. But never do we just, oh, come on, you got to believe. That's not what we're about. So no, I never try to talk anyone into it. Yeah. And some people don't ever feel anything. They don't experience anything. And I believe that's an individualistic kind of scenario. I think for the most part, if any of our energy feels like this person is guarded and they don't need to be messed with, they simply do not mess with them out of respect and out of like, I'm not going to waste my time, you know? So, people can think I'm cuckoo. I don't care. You know, I used to think that's something I didn't want, but I don't care. You have to be a little weird. You have to be a little strange. You have to be able to think outside the box when you work where I do, and you tell people the things you tell, whether it's just in regards to history. And Memphis, as y'all know, has got some crazy history, or if it's in regards to our paranormal, you got to be able to get out of your comfort zone and be able to dabble. And if it's not for some people, then it's not for them. So be it. Yeah. This
house was built about what time?
It was built from in an 18-month time period from 1870 to 1871.
Uh-huh. And so right during the Civil War, actually, I guess at that point.
Well, it was on the heels of the Civil War.
Yeah, okay.
The Woodruff family was already here in Memphis during the Civil War. They came from New Jersey. So they were here in the city. And there were a few houses on Adams Avenue that were pre-Civil War, but the majority of them, like especially ours, were post-Civil War. So it's on the heels of the Civil War. And Mr. Woodruff was banging it with his business. He was doing quite well.
Must have.
Yes.
And in the day on Adams and maybe Jefferson, some of the other streets in that area, do they know how many mansions were in that area? And there's only a handful now, right?
There's only a handful, sadly, Steve. Now, on Adams Avenue, there were 32.
Wow.
32.
Wow.
So you're looking at a block or so from the river, because, you know, Adams dead ends right down there at the river. So, and then just a few blocks east of us would have been 32 mansions on a beautifully lined avenue. And then in the surrounding streets, Jefferson, like you mentioned, Poplar, Court, Madison, there were hundreds of them. Washington, There
Union had a number of them.
Union, absolutely, going all the way to Union. You should look at, which you probably have, you've been in Memphis for so long, but look at some of those before and after. It is amazing and sad. And I have there's a few generations of my family that are Memphians that grew up here. My dad still bemoans the good old days with Rustwood Park and all that. And he was a Midtowner. He grew up in Midtown. And, it's just, those are days of yore. Sadly, the city decided that none of that was, quote, history or historically significant enough to keep around. So we're lucky to have what we have.
Yeah.
Trust me, the city was there with the bulldozers to plow us down. So
it's a great area, and just to go down and hang on a Saturday afternoon, take a tour or whatever, and walk the grounds. It's great.
And there's a nice little resurgence going on in Victorian Village. We're in Compass. We're in Compass in the medical district, and there's some stuff going on. There's a lot of exciting things going on. A lot of apartments being built. A couple other venue spaces are going to open up. So there's a lot going on, and it's long overdue. We're just in this forgotten zone between Midtown and downtown, and we're clipped on the side of the medical district. And people, do you know how many times Memphians born and bred, have come in? I never knew this place existed, or
amazing.
I knew, but never made it in here. And I'm like, well, shame on you, but you're here now, so good, But yeah, I never knew this place was here, and I've been in Memphis my whole life. So yeah, I hear that a lot more than I would like to. But the point is, you get there, so it's important.
Yeah,
for the last about 9.5 years or so, and I was sharing this with Steve a little bit before we came on the air, but since my father passed away, I've been very in tune into the spirit world, and I've had so many things that have happened that I know 100% is my dad letting me know that he's still around. And I've seen a famous psychic medium, John Edward, who had that show on TV years ago called Crossing Over. I've seen him 3 times over the last 9 years or so in person. And he said that our loved ones, they don't miss us because they have us. They are with us all the time. They hear and see everything that's going on around in our lives. He said, we miss them because we don't have them here physically, but they don't miss us because they are around, and their energy and spirit is around us all the time. This is such a wonderful story, and why Steve actually approached me with this and thought it would be a great idea to have, a podcast about this, and to come on and share the story, being, Halloween's here, and this is an exciting time, and, for people to learn a little bit new. Like I said, I've never been there before, and, I can't wait to come down there and take a tour, and I want to do it at night. That's when I want to come down. I think that would be a lot of fun.
You say you do those evening twilight tours once a month about?
Yeah, once a month. I tried to get, now I did a few more this month because that's what everybody expects, but I'll get one on the books. And also, I'm sure y'all are familiar with Backbeat Tours here in Memphis, a touring company, Backbeat. They do a Friday night ghost hunt with us.
Really?
On Friday evenings, yes. They will come to the mansion. People get to come in, and it's cool because we'll have some little amateur ghost hunting equipment for them to kind of toy with, and we tell them stories, much like what we've just told. I've just told the two of you, but yeah. So if you want to hop on a Backbeat tour, just go to their website and book it through there. However, if you just want to come up there one night and say, "Hey, Georgia, I want to come hang out," just come on, let me know, and y'all can come and bring cameras or whatever, and we'll do it up. I don't know yet because I had to sit down with my calendar and get something on the books for November, December Twilight Tour, but it need not be something in the more formal aspect. If y'all want to come over, all you gotta do is let me know. I love being there in the evening. It takes on a totally different mood than it does in the daytime. The house has a different personality in the evening. And that's one of the things that makes it really, really outstanding, is that it shifts so much. I live in a house in Midtown that's over 100 years old. There was a double murder in my house back in the 1970s, and I'm telling you, nothing. I feel just really a calm and a peace here, but I don't feel like there's anything worth. Why would anybody that went out in that fashion right here, why would they want to stick around to talk about it? You know what I mean? Yeah. awful way for these people to die. They were murdered. So I never expect to have that at my own home. And I feel for you, Michael. All my sympathies to you, what you went through with your father, what you're still going through. I'm going to be honest. My husband just died recently this summer. Halloween is our anniversary. This is a very difficult time for me right now. But I'm going to get through it. But what Michael said about how they are with us, and we're supposed to know that, but we don't know that because we don't have that. We don't have that essence. And I really don't want my husband to make an appearance to me. I'm not ready for that. Maybe, Michael, I will be. But right now, and our cat died the same week as my husband. Now that thing I have seen my cat Bean. She has made herself known to me, but I'm not ready to mingle with my husband in where he is now. I'm just not ready for that. Maybe one day I will be, but I think that if anybody's going to make an appearance here for me, other than my cat, it may be the folks that were murdered here back in the 70s. So I don't have to think of that at home. I can kind of put that on my head, but at work, it's all around me, and I invite it because it's almost comforting. It is comforting in a way, because I feel like it's part of who I am, because I'm welcomed by them and they're used to me. And that's a comfort. You know, it's nothing that makes me feel like I need to run in fear or anything. And here I might feel like, oh my goodness, ooh, murdered people. No, don't want them coming to kind of seek me out. And nor am I ready for my husband to yet, because it's too soon. Yeah. But there at the mansion at Woodruff-Fontaine, I feel like it's an honor that they have chosen those of us that they've chosen. Even though I'm not a medium or a sensei, they still have let me know more than once. Just the other day, as a matter of fact, I had something run across my back twice. So they're like, "We're still here, Georgia."
Was it your cat?
No, I was just standing there talking to folks, and something kind of went whoop whoop on my back, and there was a little sound that followed. So, I'm like, "What?" So yeah, they're with me.
It is interesting. People that are in an environment like that, they're not freaked or scared about it. And I told you about the experience in this Midtown house where this woman and two other guys lived, and they were talking about it matter-of-factly. And, we're familiar with the name of the lady who probably lived there, just like Molly Fontaine, and they were totally at ease with it. And yet I'm going, my gosh, and I'm watching these pans, still come to a rest. That it was very bizarre, but interesting.
By surprise. And it's Molly Woodruff, not Molly Fontaine, but there was a Molly Fontaine. But it's Molly Woodruff.
I'm sorry. Molly Fontaine is a place across the street, isn't it?
But Molly Fontaine was a Molly that lived there in the mansion. But what we feel, the energy belongs to Molly Woodruff. So yeah, people often get the Mollys confused. And I like to set that straight.
Okay.
But yeah, see, to them, they are used to it. I'm used to it up there. So I don't. It's now not that something still can't catch me by surprise, but yeah, I'm kind of used to it. I'm like, oh yeah, well that's just how it is.
Right. Okay, that's good.
Georgia, we appreciate you coming on today. This has been exciting. I can't wait for people to see this. It's very interesting information. And Steve, thanks so much for co-hosting with me today. This has been a lot of fun.
Yeah, man. Absolutely.
Really, I hope they enjoy it, and I hope y'all enjoy it. I know I talk a lot, but I want somebody to come and visit us, whether it's in one of our evening tours or just daytime, and just see how beautiful the place is and what significant history it holds for our city. And then we can also chit chat about these fun little things.
I'm going to be down there Wednesday if you're going to be there.
Yes, I will be there Wednesday.
I'll see you then.
Yes. Yay. You too, Michael, come along.
Okay. Awesome.
Let me know.
Okay. Thank you guys so much. You'll have a great day.
Happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween.
Bye.
Bye-bye.